Howard Lindzon is the founder and general partner at Social Leverage. All opinions expressed by Howard and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Social Leverage or StockTwits. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for decisions. Guests may maintain positions and securities discussed in this podcast.
On this episode of the Skyler Irvine Show, I sit down with Howard Lindzon, and we talk about what it's like to launch a YouTube channel in 2006, the innovations coming to personal finance, and do-it-yourself investing for anyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I sure did. I'm a big fan of Howard, so let's get right into this episode of the Skyler Irvine Show. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Skyler Irvine Show, episode 105, where I've got a very, very special guest that I'm super excited about. This is as close to becoming a fanboy on my own show as I've ever been. So without further ado, Howard Lindzon, how do I introduce you? You've got your man of many titles, co-founder, chairman of StockTwits, general partner at Social Leverage. Is that enough or is there more?
More than enough. I mean, I would say husband 23 years.
And that's why you've been a husband of 23 years, is because you say it in these moments. Well done.
Yeah, well, I mean,
well done.
You know, there's moments where you're just like, oh, but 23 years I'm proud of, based on math alone.
We just celebrated, literally this weekend, my 7th wedding anniversary.
7, yeah, you got a long way to go.
I can't,
anything can go. Anything can happen.
Believe it. Yes.
And then I have 2 kids at University of Arizona. I went to Arizona State, so they've obviously tortured me, and have a dog, and I love my job.
So how do you define what your job is right now for people that are just now learning about you?
Well, it's a question in the family. My in-laws, a Jewish family, you know, so last generation. My wife's a lawyer. Her twin sister's a lawyer, now a judge here.
And those are easy
her other
to say.
sister's a lawyer, and their son, their brother, is an emergency doctor. So their big concern for 20 years is, what do we tell people you do? Mm-hmm. Which is what,
as simply as possible.
Which proves how broken the system is. Which is why I tell kids, if my kids came to me and said they wanted to be lawyers, I'd be disappointed. So we're in this new era, but I generally my job is to find great people. You know, I'm a scout for people, and obviously I invest in software. So I am finding great people that are starting software companies, and Social Leverage, my fund, invests in them. Back in 2008, I also started my own software company called StockTwits, which is now the largest social network for traders and investors. I have a great CEO and team in New York. I stepped out 3 years ago to be chairman.
Okay.
So I'm not in an executive role, though I'm very active on the site. And our thesis, and I think I told you, was, man, this next generation is going to want to do the same things as the last generation, but you're going to do it in completely different ways because they have different tools. They have, obviously, software. They have a smartphone, and they have social networks. So there is this whole new way this next generation are going to learn about the stock market and invest and trade, and there's the next Warren Buffett out there, and we want to teach them.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating, is how much you've dedicated to trying to simplify the investing process. That's something where I've talked about this before, but there was a time in my life where I realized how little I knew about investing. The first job I ever got right out of college, I had to fill out this entire large packet about which 401k plan I wanted, and I ended up making one of the biggest financial decisions of my life up until that time by asking the guy in the cubicle which one he did.
Yes.
Because I figured he probably did all the work.
Yes.
And I realized I didn't know anything. Meanwhile, I was pretty good at fantasy football, and I was like, something needs to switch. I'm spending way too much time watching ESPN, not enough time doing some of these other things. And one of those things was just getting up early and watching CNBC for an hour every day, until one day I remember, and I think we talked about this, someone said something and I just blurted out like, that's dumb.
Yes.
And I realized, okay, this is just ESPN, Sports Center, but for financial news. It isn't smarter than someone can just understand. Once you learn the language, it gets a little bit comfortable.
Yes.
So for me, that was like the intro to finance. What was like Finance 202 or more advanced was when I discovered StockTwits and got in there and started seeing people have real conversations, but also be a little bit witty and sarcastic and silly with it. Yeah. And that was so eye-opening because it made it fun and it made it real and didn't make you feel bad for asking a question that someone else might make you feel bad. Yeah. And the fact that that was something you created, and it seemed like when we talked a little bit recently that was your mission. Rarely does your mission come to fruition much like that did. What is it like just kind of seeing that come to reality?
Well, you fight it. So, I mean, now I'm 53. Nothing works. I mean, I'm in good shape, and I wish I was younger, and stuff, but like things are broken all over my body in terms of, manscaping and all the other things that you have to deal with as a 53-year-old man. But so I think the lesson is I didn't enjoy until recently what it was, because we were fighting so hard, making a lot of mistakes, because founders, they look at TechCrunch, or in my industry, in the software industry, they look at TechCrunch. They watch the Facebook movie, and everything just looks, you only have to screw a few people and you can build $1 billion company. And so there's just so much talent, and there's so much scale, and there's so much opportunity, and then there's so much knowledge, and there's so many experts, and there's so many mentors that it's overwhelming. This is all good stuff. Yeah. But when you're living it and you're seeing what the competition's doing, you're hearing every single step, kind of like sports, like armchair quarterback. Everybody's armchair quarterbacking Facebook. It's like that used to be, we just talked about the Chicago Bears or the Cards like that. Now it's every company, every decision's being scrutinized, and you get lost in that. So I think the ESPN of startups kind of happened, and it screwed up, I think, this past generation. Everybody was comparing themselves to other people, and everybody's under the microscope, and there was just so many good companies, and there was so many sexy stories. So you get lost in that. And looking back 10 years now at StockTwits, I'm like so proud of it, because as many mistakes as I've made in strategy things that we could question, from the naming of the company to the colors to the who do we kick off, how do we curate, how do we build community, terms of use, all the things I make fun of Twitter and Facebook of. I'm proud of the things that StockTwits has done to make it a fun, educational place. Not perfect, because in real time, social media is impossible to curate.
And this is really interesting to have this conversation, because for people that don't know, StockTwits is essentially
a social network.
Twitter for
finance.
Stocks and finance.
It was inspired completely. When I saw Twitter, just quickly, I don't know how much time we have, but backstory is there was a big boom theory for me was YouTube. So, in in the 90s, we had all these hilarious brokerages and these great Super Bowl commercials with eTrade, baby, and yada, yada. And the whole idea was people thought they could get rich overnight, kind of like a little bit on a global scale. Bitcoin and crypto became a year ago, not so much in the U.S., but in 99, that was like the real big bang. And it was because of the internet. There was no smartphone yet, but promise of the smartphone. And so you had all these brokerages, you had all these people like trading from their desk, and it was like, oh, sexy. No one knew anything, and people got their asses handed to them. And so there was this quiet period between 2001 and 2006. And so I, as a trader, as a hedge fund manager for 18 years, was stuck with the same products. I couldn't afford Bloomberg, hated Wall Street Journal, didn't trust anybody. And our media was CNBC. Even though we didn't listen, it was sound off. We were like, who is this idiot? And why is he talking about every subject under the sun? And so that is the talking head phenomenon, where TV talks to you, you talk to it, but no one's listening. There's no way to interact. And so YouTube comes along, and although it was all cat videos and they were being sued by everybody, I was like, whoa. I'm going to go create CNBC on YouTube. And that was my pitch. I called what was a friend of mine, Fred Wilson, who happens to be one of the best venture capitalists in the world, and I had discovered him from reading his blog. And I used to leave comments on his site. This is social media. This goes to social etiquette and how people, that's how you do things, right? It's just like saying hello to people and looking them in the eye. In social media, it's like you can't harass people. You can, obviously, but it doesn't get you very far. It usually gets you blocked, which is Twitter's great innovation is the block feature. But in my industry, I was just so intrigued by social media. And I couldn't believe that people were sharing venture capital stories and term sheets and how to do this stuff. I was just like, so nice to the people and when it came time to finally ask something, I had a good enough idea, and Fred Wilson was like, I'll give you $50,000.
And I got to tell you, I watched episode 1
the Apple
a few
one?
minutes ago.
It's pretty good.
It holds up.
Yeah, it holds up pretty good.
The only thing that stands out is it's in a box instead of a horizontal, and it's like, man, 13 years ago, and yeah, it's funny and it's well put, and good thing you were on the right side of Apple too for being episode 1.
Yes, we were on the right side of a lot of things, from Chipotle's, Nike, in our first week of shows. At the time, Crocs was one of our first weekends, and I went on for an incredible run. But the idea was, I'm going to create one show at a time. We started with 3 minutes, raised $600,000. Long story short, because we were at the right place at the right time, CBS, we weren't getting 100,000 views. We were at a good show, we were getting 10,000 views, and that was with a lot of hustle and elbow grease. And back then there was YouTube, Rever, Crackle. There was 100, Daily Motion. You had Vimeo. You had to post your just like you do now with podcasts.
Yeah, it's interesting.
You had to post your work started when you made the show. It wasn't like TV where actor shows up, puts on makeup, does a line of coke, and the show gets done. Here, your work started after you made it. Then you had to edit. Then you had to hustle to distribute it. Then you had to beg people to watch it. Then if it did well, you had to go figure out sponsorships on your own. And so that was Wall Strip. I think right place, right time, CBS came along and said, fuck, this is pretty good. And what we had was influence. We didn't have masses of people watching. We had the right people watching.
Yeah, that's huge.
Lesson that goes through to today in social media is, I think we just continue to narrow this down and this super fan thing. We had super fans, and we had the right super fan.
And if you look at the model of something like CNBC, it starts out that way, but then it realizes, we've got sponsors. We need to reach as many people as possible. Yeah. Then it becomes more of Sports Center and less.
Well, they talk about Fannie Mae and Citibank 4 years longer than it needed to, and they should have been covering PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, China. They miss everything because they're talking about something that happened 4 years ago. They still are, So they're late to the party, and then they stay too long at the party. The two number one horrible things to investing is getting in too late and then staying too late. Meaning, I like to not come to the party first. But I also like to leave without saying goodbye to everybody.
Yes, it's the best.
It's the best. It's the move. And that is investing. And so that's the investing I practice, which is trend following.
Yeah, it's like by the time you hear about it from a friend or neighbor, it
depends who the friend is.
Exactly, but for the average person. But you're right.
But I'm trying to teach the average person the basics. And so now we flip around. So I work for CBS, and we can come back for that. Yeah. And then Twitter came along, and that was Big Bang 2. So Facebook never interested me. I like Instagram, and I don't use WhatsApp that much, but so I didn't really need Facebook the way I needed YouTube and the way I needed Twitter, and then obviously needed StockTwits. But then Twitter came along, and it blew my mind.
You were in 2006, so was Google purchasing YouTube, or were you on YouTube before that went down?
It was after we had started the show.
Okay.
And I remember doing a show about it, and everybody was like, there's a show that we did, Wall Strip, a Man in the Street episode, where Lindsay went in the street with a microphone and asked people, did Google overpay for YouTube? And it was like 90%. They're idiots. This goes to sentiment and what people really know, and this is why I believe there's an edge for regular people to make money in the market.
Definitely.
It's just, you can't trade against the machines, but you can stand back, listen to how people talk, and kind of do, almost do the opposite. But, when we did the next day, we went to the street and talked about the Google YouTube. Most people still hadn't heard of YouTube. Most people had thought, it's cat videos. Most people thought, they're going to get sued and they'll never make, all their content stolen. So no one was talking about where it was going to be today. I still think, flash forward to today, YouTube is massively undervalued. To this day.
Yeah.
So not only next to Instagram is it the best acquisition of all time, but it's still impossible to value. And that's what I'm trying to find. I'm trying to find companies that are impossible to value. Because if they're impossible to value, my opinion matters.
They're probably undervalued.
Or my opinion matters just as much as everybody else. And so I'm trying to find companies that are hard to value. And what's hardest to value? Software companies, because they're compounding based on how much code is written. Once Etsy or Twilio or one of these Shopify breaks free and finds a hole, it's like football. Like if you watch great running backs and they see a hole, And all of a sudden you go, I can't believe how fast that hole developed, and the guy's gone. Well, it was any great running back. Once they get the hole, it's gone.
Okay.
And so once these great software companies have a product market fit or a hole, and they can code and compound, it's very hard to figure out how big these companies can get. And they could be overvalued or undervalued, but what I'm saying is nobody knows how big these companies can get. And so that's the exciting thing about investing in this era is software. The railroads, in the late 1800s it was railroads, in the 1900s it was automobiles, and then it was probably energy, which was boring, and then it was CPG and consumer goods, and now we have software. I don't know how long that will go, but we're early stages still. Mark Andreessen says software is eating the world. I generally say yes, and the world's pretty hungry for software.
Do you feel like you don't know how long software will be, but can you confidently predict that the next wave will be AR, VR, or is it impossible at this time to even predict what might be next whenever it happens to be?
Yeah, it depends on the application. I'm not a user of I think AR makes sense to me because Snapchat's AR. My kids are using it. They don't know that it's called AR, but they're in an augmented reality world. Virtual reality, strapping something on, doesn't make sense to me. I'm not that guy who straps stuff on. This is the most, and I still turn it over. It's the less I have, the better I feel. And I think, so AR is cool, but I don't know that much about it. But VR, I just have avoided. If I don't understand something, that's a major lesson for investors. Not only I'll walk into how to do it, but avoiding things that make no sense. Airlines, stuff that are hard, energy, airlines, for me, VR. Things that I just have no interest in and I have no edge. In terms of, we talked about smart people, dumb people. I go back, I do the sports analogy all the time about the Tour de France. Most people have seen it, where they've turned on the TV and they see 150 people congested in a peloton, they call them, cycling together. And the truth about the peloton is those people in the peloton are going 40% faster than they could alone. And that is the essence of investing.
Yeah.
And that is why this era is so interesting, is because you got 20, 30 smart people, whether they're on Snapchat or Telegram or StockTwits or Twitter or Reddit, wherever your group hangs and talks about what you got, your group of experts, you are so ahead of everybody else, right? You are not inside information, but you are drafting with who you want to draft with about a subject that you want to draft, right? How did I find you? I don't know anything about local media companies, and I tweet. I'm looking to set up a studio in my new office for Social Leverage, and I got I got 100 responses, but yours is local. You found me through a referral. Someone said, "Hey, you should know Howard."
Yeah.
How do you put a price on that?
And that's
for
really
the speed.
interesting. Yeah.
And then 2 days later, we're in the studio talking about how I want to do my show. And it's something that I've been ham and egging and putting off for 10 years. But then, boom, applying the right pressure at the right time to my network, right? And asking for, everybody wants to get in that peloton. And so now we're connected and we can move fast to a yes or a no and kind of network.
Yeah, at the best,
how do you put a value
it creates
on that?
The opportunity. And that's the thing. Like, how do you market for that today? How did But
I would say more importantly, how do you value Twitter? This is like, Twitter may be overvalued or undervalued, and they're not making any money.
They didn't make
off
it, after that connection.
Which is my problem with them. They're not being. This is my argument about Twitter: is they've chosen the lazy model, slap ads in my stream, versus really figuring out how to monetize the long tail of this business where both sides are happy. LinkedIn did it very well, and Microsoft overpaid for that company, or so they thought, but it's a great acquisition for Microsoft.
Yeah, a long enough timeline.
Software and a network is cheap. And so Twitter's never going away, but I really struggle with how they've attacked their business model.
Twitter has that problem of not having a huge user base, but a very loyal.
No, they have the million Howard Sterns.
Yeah.
They have the Howard Stern of every subject, and that's how they can monetize. And they've chosen to monetize by monetizing everybody,
and poorly too. Like it's
just hard.
Of all of the ad platforms, it's the toughest.
Yeah,
and as someone who's trying to monetize and market and brand and get in front of things, where SEO search results. You didn't go to YouTube and Google or Facebook and type in the search like podcasting studio in Phoenix, you asked your network, which is global, and luckily, through serendipity and timing, and someone who's seen enough of my stuff, who commented and mentioned my name, that connect us. How do you pay for that in this world, other than
you pay it forward, like we do. We try and be nice to other people coming up, meaning it's our peloton.
Definitely, yeah.
And so you protect your peloton. Obviously, some people can't keep up. There's some people that just fall over and tip into the peloton. You got to be careful because they'll hurt a lot of people. And so there's all the same problems. And I call it cancer, right? Where cancer can get into the network, just like it can get into your body. And it takes a while to remove it because you're vouching for people. So we all are in our own interest of keeping our networks clean, which is really a beautiful thing, which is like what we do on Twitter and Facebook. What we get upset about at these companies is when they throw stuff into our peloton or into our feed that we didn't ask to see. That's the disconnect. And we've lived that at StockTwits too, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
We are an advertising-based company. We hate that we're advertising-based, but we are small. And, we don't have enough. We can't just go jack up prices. In this world, people want stuff for free. So it's not perfect. There are problems, and it's not all Twitter's fault. But this is the armchair quarterbacking that I do for a living.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, Instagram, for example, is a free service. It changes its algorithm one day to where now these companies' posts are being seen by 1/10 of the people that they were a week before, and they're outraged and they're furious and they want to. And it's like, but you were doing it for free. You now you have to pay to play. I mean, yeah, they got you hooked, but Instagram really doesn't owe you anything. You can leave. And as someone who's done the same things, what do? Do you charge people a usage fee? Eventually, you have to make money. You try to get as many users as possible up front and then monetize. And I think that's something that Facebook's done that people underestimate, just how difficult it is to make as much money as they are while still keeping people active and using it and trying it, where every time Snapchat tries something, it loses a huge chunk and has to slowly build it back up. Instagram's following the same model. Twitter, it seems like their biggest strength is moving as slowly as possible to make changes, so maybe they don't make the wrong one that hurts them, but they're also slow to adapt with something as simple as an edit button that people have been asking for. As someone who's kind of has a similar background, every time you make one change, you're going to piss off half the people and maybe the other half don't notice.
Yeah, I think what I've learned too is that Fred Wilson says it best. Again, he's a great VC. Is can't be someone else's bitch. So if you build on top of something,
that's the best way I've heard it said.
So if you are building your business on Instagram and you are not expecting to get screwed, I mean, come on. They are going to do, it's the scorpion story. It's why did you sting me? Well, I'm a fucking scorpion.
Yeah, it's what I do.
It's what I do. So, and we learned that at StockTwits. StockTwits was originally built on Twitter at an API, and that's why it blew up so well. Everybody was just TweetDeck. I was an investor in Bitly. I was investing in any company that could, because we went through an era, 2006 to 2009, where everybody was hitchhiking off these. It was a win-win for a while, meaning Facebook was growing. Zynga grew on top of Facebook. Everybody grew on top of Twitter. And Instagram wasn't even big yet. Yeah, Instagram blew up on Twitter, and Twitter cut them off. Yeah. So I'm saying we saw wars. They were global thermonuclear digital wars, and a lot of mistakes were made because it was the first time it had ever happened. There was no Sun Tzu. The enemy in software, the enemy of enemy, everything creeps and seeps, and there's just a global flat world that's connected.
Yeah.
So a lot of mistakes were made in that period, 2006, 2009. We can see who came out on top. That's Facebook and WeChat. Those are the two ones. I own both stocks. Very hard to stop Facebook, and it'll be very hard to stop. Even the government can't really stop it. They don't understand it.
That's the biggest thing.
The plans are silly. Apple has a monopoly in one area. That's on the 30%. What they've done to Spotify is what else they've done, I don't know. But what they've done to Spotify, as a lover of Spotify, I'm pissed. Even though I love Apple, but it's hard to see where each company is breaking kind of the law, and chalk it up to there being a software tax for the next 100 years. I mean, these are the new Paul Gettys and oil companies. Google, you're going to hear about fines till they're blue in the face, but I don't think Google cares.
Well, Google,
it's just a cost of doing business.
They pay more fines in Europe than they pay taxes. So for
cost
them,
of doing
it's cheaper
business.
to do fines than it's cheaper to essentially.
Which is why I own those stocks. Is we have They will get disrupted. It happens. Google being the hardest, I think, to disrupt because of Maps, because of Android, because of mail.
Yeah.
Like these weird,
and how well
not
it
just
stays
search.
out of the news, I think, is huge.
Yeah,
like they stay out of the spotlight as much as possible, with doing probably more than what Facebook's done.
Well, because they know so much. It's almost impossible for them not to be hated, and yet here they are, not hated and adored. So they have a serious power, and I think they've always known that. And Apple has serious power. They've always known that. I think they've made the most mistakes out of the big four. And then, China had a free run, right? Tencent out. There's a digital wall. I mean, Trump's talking about building a physical wall. There has been a digital wall. You go to China. I've been. Nothing gets through. You can't use StockTwits, Twitter, Facebook. So that's a pretty good advantage for a nation the size of China to have Tencent and Alibaba grow without U.S. competition. Mm-hmm. Won't be the same way in India. If you go to India, Facebook is India.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's different. But in China, like there used to be an era as an investor, I would like, if I'm getting pitched a Chinese idea, and it's not P.F. Chang's, why would I invest? But this era with Tencent, which owns WeChat and WePay, is they're so big and they have no incentive to cheat because they're making money hand over fist, and because they are a monopoly and moving their way to the United States. I don't care what they do. I just believe that they are unstoppable.
You don't care what they do as an investor.
As an investor, it's just so big, no one can figure out what it's like.
Yeah,
and their users love it. Anybody in Asia who uses WeChat and WePay love it, and they're coming for the U.S. They took a piece of Snapchat. It'll be up to our government to see what they allow these Chinese companies to do with their cash and power as they come freely over the border. So a lot of things, even though Trump's rhetoric is wrong, a lot of it is around digital. He doesn't even understand it.
Yeah.
But the wall that we've been up against is the Chinese digital wall. So we're fighting these battles that make no sense and riling up our crowd when the real money has been made already, because Chinese had an unfair advantage with digital.
What do you think happens? I mean, do we fast forward 15 years? What does it look like? We don't know what the next 15 years look like individually, but is there going to be a government that understands what's happening enough to be able to make regulation that makes sense? Or is it going to be us punishing someone like the government punishes Facebook, and that gives a company like Tencent even a bigger advantage when they come through?
Yeah, over my pay grade, but
Okay.
I will try and answer it. And that's what my podcast will be about, is talking to smarter people than me about these issues. Because I want to know how to position my family. So
that's why I'm asking.
I want to know where the hell my family should be when it happens. I don't want to be living underground like the crazies.
That's why Phoenix makes a lot more sense.
We're not going to have a nuclear war.
Yeah.
And if we have a nuclear war,
everybody loses.
Yeah, we all lose.
It doesn't matter where your money is.
So if we have a digital war, I'd like to have a chance of knowing where I should be and how I should live and where my money should be. And so I live as if it's happening, meaning I live as a global citizen. Meaning I never thought that first we'd move from Phoenix to Coronado, but 2008 happened. Then I never thought we'd move back here, but because of taxes and school, we did. And now that I'm here, I'm going, well, it's not so bad for 4 months of the year, and San Diego 6 months, or 6 months of the year here for taxes, and 4 months a year in San Diego, and 2 months in New York and Europe, and have friends all over the world from my social networks, and you have Airbnb, and you have Uber, and you have, oh my God, if you can't be mobile and social, you are at a disadvantage. And I think the number one thing old people are writing off about young kids is how mobile and social they are. They social in a different way.
They look down on it too.
They just don't get it. My nephews, my in-laws still ask, what should we tell people you do? And my nephews at U of A are begging me for jobs that are startups. And 3 of them are working as interns at startups in my portfolio. I couldn't be, of all the work I've ever done, that is the proof.
That's pretty cool,
that what I do is satisfying to me, is to hear that my nephew's on their own. Yeah, I can get them an intro or whatever, but they want to work for the companies in our portfolio, and that they can get jobs because they're smart enough, and they're not going to waste 3 years in law school, because that's where AI goes. AI goes to medicine, goes to accounting, goes to software, goes to, you still need a doctor, but you won't need it in diagnosis.
Yeah.
You still need a lawyer, but you'll need it over strategy versus paperwork. You'll still need an accountant, but to do your tax return and so prices in those industries and compression is scary.
Yeah.
And those industries have lobbies. So, I worry about those, but I really feel that is something that this next generation should not be focused on. Now, if it's about rights and the right kind of law, and understanding law, I wish I understood law, but I'm also glad that I'm not a lawyer. I'd be miserable. So I think there's so much that is coming in terms of borders. And Twitter was like that until they screwed it up. Twitter was like, we all had a country. We were affinity with, like, some of the people didn't even have names or faces, still don't. But we were affinity with them, and we could go to a city never having met that person, and we were buddies. Whereas Facebook was much different. So Twitter really had that power of what the future was going to look like because it was like country of 1, country of 20, country of 80 based on your interests.
Yeah, Twitter was like
based on your
people
interests
that you were interested in. Facebook was
Those
knowing everything about the people that you already know.
Twitter was your homies.
Yeah.
You felt like if I had to go to Amsterdam and get out of town, these people would take care of me because they knew what I was like. I banked with those people. Those are the people that knew my soul. Whether it was dark or light, they knew my soul. And so that is the future. I think we've got like kind of stuff thrown in the way of it. But you got to consider yourself mobile and social. And I think that's why crypto became so big and will continue to become. This next wave will be even more interesting. Yeah, is that it was overpromise and underdeliver.
That's the thing. The first wave was a promise that people were buying into, but no one knew what they were really buying, and people took advantage of that.
If it only works for people in Venezuela and Chile or wherever it needs to work, great, but not enough. And it may never work for the United States because the United States has Venmo and it has a pretty sophisticated banking system that works, and fees are pretty low, and it has Visa, MasterCard. But there will be use cases around, and I'm excited about that. And that goes back to software, and that goes back to mobile and social, and that's what crypto is going to be huge. I just can't predict which ones, and I'll be interviewing people to talk about that stuff.
Perfect. So we'll get to all of that really fast and rapid because I know we got to lock this up pretty soon. So your involvement with social leverage, you say your edge, you stick to it, is investing in software specifically because it can scale almost to infinity.
Yes.
What else do you see that makes you confident in making a bet in something? Do you wait? I mean, you're pretty early stage.
Yeah, we're first.
So that's kind of high risk, huge reward.
Yeah. So we like that. So when I ran a hedge fund, it was like, oh, you got to beat the S&P. And about 10 years ago, I'm like, that's over. And it made no sense to try and beat an inanimate index that was actually a trend-following index. The S&P 500 replaces bad companies, adds good companies, and it's market cap weighted.
Constantly.
Almost impossible to beat unless you take extra risk that your customers probably don't really understand. So you're always at odds with your customer or your client. In my business now, my clients expect to lose all their money because we're making crazy bets.
Yeah.
Knowing
that going in though, changes everything. Yeah.
Explaining that to your clients, and then they make money. They think you're a genius, which is nice. But the truth is, 70% of funds don't even return all their capital, so it is not easy. And but it's nice to know that your LPs are on the same side of the table of you. The fees are real. The returns generally can be real. And it's something we call power law, where one company pays for all the other ones, 150x type company. And in an era of software, it's just much easier to create 50x companies. It doesn't mean you can make money. It just means you can create 50x company because of the compounding of code and software. So we're first check. Our average check size $500,000 to $1 million. We're on our third fund. And we invest in 20 to 25 companies per fund, and we raise money every few years. And what we're looking for is great founders. My partner, Gary, focuses on enterprise software. He had sold his last company was acquired by Salesforce. He worked there for 4 years at Desk.com running it with his partner. And so he has his own mafia. We get these little mafias where people, these software companies continue to buy companies. And so the founders, you just get these groups of people that see
Smart
the future.
People get into the same room.
Yeah, and they see the future, and they're getting together on what needs to be disrupted. And the big companies are like Jurassic Park. They're trying to protect their moats, put up walls, and slow things down.
Slow it down. Yeah,
Their whole goal at Salesforce is slow it down.
Yeah.
They don't care how bloated Salesforce gets as long as the ecosystem is locked and loaded. And so every 2-3 years they come into hibernation and do some crazy billion-dollar acquisition that they probably didn't need to do, but it slows things
down.
down. Microsoft did that way back.
Yeah.
You had to send them your product and hope that they would approve it for a flying Windows. So and then people complain about 30% in Apple. I'm like, you weren't around when we had to go to CompUSA and beg to get our products on the shelf. This is a lot better than what it was when I was a kid. And then in the future, we're probably going to have none of that. The future will probably
have new
be
stuff to complain about.
We'll have stuff to complain about. It'll probably be, I didn't know wasn't hosting my own site. Right now, it's like Instagram, Shopify, Twilio, using these tools to own your own domain. It's kind of like a Seinfeld episode. Be the master of your own domain. Get your own website. Do the hard thing. Go to WordPress. Get your domain early.
Yeah.
Get your kids' domain. Go to GoDaddy. Buy as many domains for them that they may need to protect themselves. And then there's only two ways to be online: never or always.
Yeah,
I've chosen always because if it's never, it's really hard to be never, and you can't control what people are searching and saying about you. But if it's always, at least you can control your own narrative, which you may only need once in your life, but that one time you need it, it's important to have.
Yeah, and you're preaching to the choir here, so I love hearing this, but with like a different perspective on it. But yeah, if you're the one that hides from it, it's just going to happen when you're not around.
Well, you won't be able to protect yourself.
You can't protect yourself. You have nothing to back up whatever you're doing with. And if you're on Instagram, you don't have followers. You have Instagram followers. And when Instagram makes a change, you could lose everything overnight if you don't have an email list or a website or people.
No, it's not that bad with Instagram.
Totally. But
that's
when you're building something, you're the type of person that's, all right, what's the worst case scenario? Okay, let's plan for that because that could kill us. So if it's not worst case scenario, then you're even better protected.
Yeah.
Looking at some of these things where, I don't want to learn Facebook because it's hard. Well, if you're trying to build this following, you kind of need to be
It's never
everywhere.
been easier.
And
if that's hard, you're screwed.
Exactly, yeah. Building an email list, getting them to follow you instead of your account, or having a weird name instead of your name makes it harder for you to ever kind of grow with that over time because Instagram didn't exist before the iPhone. And if everything's built off of one of these platforms, it's really hard to hold up long term.
Yes. But you have to continually invest in yourself.
Yeah.
Meaning,
but people don't want to do that. People it used to be
luckily, if
graduate
everybody
college,
wanted to do that,
graduate college, get that job,
and
then you never have to learn anything new for the next 60 years.
People should watch,
and they're the ones that are most upset when you got to go back and learn a new trade or something. And
Rodney Dangerfield was an important comedian. If you go watch Caddyshack, and just see
yes.
how caddies work, right? And life's not fair. You know what I mean?
Yes.
The world needs ditch diggers too. I mean, Rodney had all the lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that is. I'm hoping. Listen, you can only share what you know.
Yeah.
If people want to object, that's the edge that we get. There is this thing happening. It's not pleasant. We're seeing the politics of it play out right now. A lot of misinformation, etc. But for those that are building their networks and just focusing on, the power of being able to go to Amsterdam and see friends and invest in companies, the power of going to London, forget about Brexit, just having friends in these places and being able to stay in an emergency. That is what people need to be working on. That is what young people are working on. It's pissing the last generation off.
Yeah.
They're trying to put everything back in the wall again and tell you what to be afraid of. These kids aren't afraid of anything. You know what they're afraid of? Not having access to Google Maps, because then they wouldn't know where to go.
Or no Wi-Fi.
Yeah, or no Wi-Fi. Those are two frightening things to a millennial.
What are I got this question asked a couple times recently in different formats, so I want to ask it to someone smarter than myself. But in your mind, thoughts on the Lyft IPO, Lyft versus Uber, if it matters, which one IPOs first, and the numbers that Lyft is now responsible for publicly sharing don't look amazing.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on just it as an investment, short-term, long-term?
Well, what's great is, you can own everything. So the way when I say what my perception is, I speak with what I own. It's just not in my portfolio.
I love this.
No,
yeah.
I've been wrong about Lyft from $1 billion. I used to make fun when Carl Icahn was investing with Mark Andreessen at $1.5 billion. There's no way in my mind that I thought Uber wasn't going to put the screw into them. Mm-hmm. So I think it's hard to make fun of any company that's that big.
Yeah.
Did Uber screw up? Yes.
All the time, and they're still.
But at $80 billion, did they screw up compared to ratty old me? But when they went wide, global, Lyft survived local. So people wanted a backup. There were always going to be a number two.
That's the thing. They survive by being the other one.
Yeah, so there's one
What's
of the
the
few.
other Uber?
There's very few industries where being the second matters. But transportation and logistics, yeah. Apple Maps, I don't use it, but a lot of people do.
The other one, yeah.
Email, yeah. So when it's a protocol or when it's around transportation, around communication and logistics, being number 5, being number 10 can be great. Mm-hmm. But we're taught in if you're not number 1, if you're a venture capitalist and you're not number 1 for your venture capitalist, you're forgotten. So there's that whole thing where Uber, in trying to be global number 1, forgot U.S. and Lyft survived and pecked away at just being Lyft, and that was a great strategy.
So for the average
now
investor,
that they're public,
yeah, I was gonna say,
okay, I'd still rather own Uber, and I own some Uber, luckily, but I don't own it. I think, the average person can own 10 or 15 companies, and it's not my time. I'm constantly gardening.
Yeah.
I got to pick the 10 or 15 that I can go to sleep at night with, and I'm not worried about doubling mine, but I want to understand everything about that company. I'd like them to be profitable. At my age, they have to be profitable. I mean, if I'm choosing Lyft and I don't have inside information, you're crazy. And that's where the stock market is full of minds. Is the media's talking about it? Of course they're talking about it because it's fresh and it's new, but they're not talking about it in the way that really should help you. It's number 100 on the list of things that I think most people need to know. Now, if they start making profits, all bets are off, but there'll be plenty of time to jump on many bandwagons.
Yeah, even if you get in late, if it's going to be that
it'll
good.
be a different lift.
Yeah.
So that's the way I look at investing in that way. You can't own everything.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in 10 stocks is a lot of stocks to
which
own.
is my fault with the S&P 500. I think if you're going to do it, do it.
Yeah.
That's fine. But to own 500 stocks is ridiculous. Why should people own Nokia and Samsung in the same phone they own if they like Apple? It's just diluting it's like going into Walgreens and seeing 700 Band-Aid brands. Come on. Mm-hmm. You stand there, or 800 shampoos, and you're like, wait a minute, I just wanted to wash my hair. And I think that's where we're at with financial products and ETFs. It's like people are being just confused to the max. And that's why you really have to kind of understand that owning 10 to 15 great companies, I call them 8 to 80 brands that 5-year-olds recognize and 80-year-olds recognize, or 8-year-olds. And it could be now 8 months to 108 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, come out of the womb, you're swiping a screen. Or using Johnson & Johnson products or Nike shoes. And if you're 100, same thing. So those are brands that, if you can't figure that out and you want to go buy stuff that, and you can confuse it by saying Lyft is an 8 to 80 brand. Okay, definitely 8-year-olds know about it, and Tesla's an 8 to 80-year-old brand. But then you got to add some more curation, like profits. Well, if you can't find an 8 to 80 brand that's ripping profits, you maybe just.
And Tesla's a really good example of.
I want to own it.
And I want to speak to average investors, because that's who I talk with. There's a lot of times people come to me and what about this new thing? Or it's the IPO, doesn't mean you're in on it early. You're in on it at the end at an IPO. Now all bets are off with what it does over the next how many years. Yeah. Tesla is one of those things where you can love a product. You can buy a product. It doesn't mean that the company is the company to invest in.
Well, that's what he's done a great job of. He's convinced his users to buy the stock. Those are two separate products. Genius. And he's gotten a lot of trouble for it too.
It's how he's gotten cheap debt.
But
basically.
In the end, I won't short Tesla because anytime I watch a Tesla user, they love their product. So I'm amazed. But I'd rather pay $200 more a share for Tesla when they're profitable and figured it out, because then they really do
exactly. And I'll be honest, I did that with Amazon.
I'll pay $400 a share knowing that Tesla's profitable.
Yeah.
Then pay $200 thinking it's cheap.
I was very late to Amazon, same type of thing. Watching it, I didn't really understand it. It wasn't making money. And then I realized now it's able to make money in all of these different things. I got into Amazon very late, but I love my position in that. I did the same thing with Facebook. I didn't get into Facebook.
Facebook's a buy now.
And now it's one of my biggest holdings is because once I saw what it could be and what it is and how undervalued it was even late, I don't mind trying to be the first one in, knowing that you are only getting in when it's kind of the opposite of what you're doing with your going after first money in on funds. It's we want to be early in because that payoff is so huge. Yeah. If you're an average investor, you're not going to get that opportunity. You only get the opportunity of once it's in the public market and inflated by the media coverage that the IPOs usually get right now, especially this year. It seems like
nobody could live with again, what I do is more art than science.
Definitely.
So I love doing it, but and I face a lot of embarrassment half the time because I'll talk to my LPs and they'll go, "Why are you doing this?" And I'm like, "Well, you hired me to do it."
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. They're all snowflakes at the beginning,
But
and I'm going to be dead wrong 50% of the time. Dead wrong.
But you're
zero.
playing a different game, and when I see people that would try to emulate what you're doing, but in the public markets, and it's like the rules are different. It's not the same. Like
profits
at all.
matter because institutions, in the end, profits matter in the stock market. Obviously, we've learned from Lyft and Uber, profits don't matter in the startup market. So they're very different games. There's a lot of similarities, but the rules are completely different, especially for returning money to my shareholders, right? They're worried about how Robinhood for us is going to be profitable. That's not what they need to worry about when we write a first check. There's two things. Can we get to breakout? Can we get to a certain amount of users, arbitrage, and that's keeping our costs down and getting to those users. And then the second game is, can we monetize them? And those are the games.
And they're really hard games.
They're really hard games because you got to get the timing right, you got to get the team right, you got to know when to turn on the faucet. And there's just, but you're investing at a 5 to 10 million valuation. Back when I really started, it was $2 million valuation. Back in my days, but now they're like 10 million valuation. So it's harder because things that go up in price, but it's a much different business. Because in the end, to be successful long term, you have to be profitable. And not just profitable, you have to have a business with catalysts that continue to drive profitability. And that's a whole different game.
Yeah.
And so I guess the joy that I have is I get to do it both. I think they're very connected. So I'm one of these people that sees both, because I had so many years loving stocks and still do it and have StockTwits, and because I've had so many years investing in startups, you see how connected the markets are. So I have this rare, what I think is edge in understanding both sides of the market. Not perfectly, but I think it's an edge.
Enough.
And we continue to try to attack what we see as our edge. And then we have strong opinions, which helps. Strong opinions in the stock market will bankrupt you. Strong opinions in the venture capital market are what you need. And as Warren Buffett would say, he does not have a strong opinion. He buys hugely profitable, moated companies. That's not a strong opinion. That's just smart. He thinks Bitcoin's a scam. Word's still out on that at $4,000. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I like to invest. I say this, and people don't know who Fred Wilson or Warren Buffett are. Well, they know who Warren Buffett is. But if it's too early for Fred Wilson and Mark Andreessen, what the hell are we? Why am I even talking about it?
Yeah.
These are two of the smartest, most successful people, and there's Sequoia and other people. But if they're not talking about it, forget it. Because why bother? But if they're talking about it, and Warren Buffett and Goldman Sachs and Jamie Dimon think it's fake, I like the middle. When they start, when Fred Wilson got bullish on Bitcoin at $1,000, it had come from 12 cents or zero.
Yeah.
So it was a very hard leap of faith to go, fuck, I can't believe I'm buying something at $1,000 that was $12. That was a good buy. So, and that's the same thing with stock. And Warren Buffett still hates Bitcoin and Jamie Dimon. So I think it's still a good buy. But I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying it's still a good buy because there's all this open space where these people have to be converted. I'm sure for the first 400 years of gold, people are like, what the hell are you lugging that shit around? What about silver? What about platinum? What about sand?
Or what about food?
What about food?
What about wheat? Yeah.
Yeah, what
Things
about weapons?
Yeah.
So what about, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We're day one of this shit.
Yeah.
And that's what software is so exciting, is gold. Even if Bitcoin is just digital gold, it's still really undervalued.
So
I'm not saying it is, but if it's just that, Bitcoin's worth a lot more.
So segueing from one digital gold to the next, let's talk about your upcoming podcast.
Okay.
What are the things that you want to be talking about, and why is now the time for you? Want to just kind of discuss this a little bit. I know you're still working on the name, but it's going to be starting sooner than later.
Yeah.
What's your vision for this?
The vision, still more pay it forward, media, branding. I have these great conversations. I have access to people that are willing to chat with me, and makes me smarter. And I've been doing it for so long anyways, whether it was the phone or email. So taking my access and trying to share it is one thing.
Yeah, and I'm excited about it. For one, I bring this up as someone who's read your blog that you've been writing for 12 years.
Yeah, daily.
It's bringing that to an audio format and a video format, and kind of for people that don't have the time to sit down and read or discover these types of things. I think one of your biggest edge in this space is making it comfortable for someone who's confused by a lot of this to make it fun and entertaining, because you don't have to hide behind big words and all these, like corporate structures, because for the average person, it can be easier to understand. We can throw in humor and pop culture and some fun stuff with it.
Yeah. So it's like, it's just going to be long form Wall Strip, which was my original show, which is like how to find trends. Is it too early? How do I learn this stuff? What's coming? And so we're just one great investment can change people's life. Okay. It's not about, out of the 20 companies that I pick in a fund, 2 have to work amazing, and maybe even 1 just super amazing, and it's called power law. And the same thing is with people, is they should, we see it with gardening way back and stuff. You prune, you continually got to prune. But when you find the winner, that is magic, and you have to learn how to spot them. Then you have to learn, more importantly, how to ride them. And this is where private markets really helped me, because in the public market it was hard. Apple doubles, and you go,
you can get out of it
I can get
anytime.
out.
Yeah,
that's just not actually helpful. Uber did us a huge favor when Travis wouldn't let people sell. We were all clamoring at $3 billion or $10 billion, or a lot of people were like, "Get me out," and it was like, "No, we're not letting anybody sell." Mm-hmm. That was a gift at $80 billion. So I think you've got to learn how to speak this language, and you've got to understand you can't just constantly rely on other people. You've got to build a skill set around this yourself. But when you have confidence, and when you see that hole, and you can build a case around it, and build comfort in owning something, that's one idea that changes your life. So I want to talk to people who that have happened, mm-hmm. what it looks like, what it feels like, what they did, the mistakes they made. So it's really not a new formula. It's just I have an access to a group of people that I know that have been through it and are willing to probably talk about it. And so that's kind of been a goal. The problem of doing it myself, and that's why I asked on Twitter, is logistics. If I'm going to make a good show, lighting should be good, sound should be good, distribution, editing, super important. Mm-hmm. Distributing it to the right places is important. As I talked about with Wall Strip, I would make the show. Then it was up to me to figure out how to distribute it, what the website looked like. Oh, man. It was. Yeah. I would never do it again. When CBS, it was like a Seinfeld episode. When CBS said, "We'll give you this," I was like,
they said,
"Let's do it for less."
Yeah.
Let's do it for less. It was just like Kramer. So, to do it this time, I only want to put out a good product. Mm-hmm. And I do a lot of my own podcasts and writing. I don't care what it looks like the next day, because I have super fans and they appreciate it, and they know they don't need high production. Mm-hmm. But for all the people that would like to see this, or I've been told want to see this,
sure, definitely, yeah,
it needs to be done in a more professional way. And so I said lighting, sound, mm-hmm. distribution, editing, how to format it. I can luckily afford to pay for that now, and so I'm going to try and just jump the shark. Plus, I'm living in one place more than I've lived in one place for a while. So Phoenix is my home right now, and so at least I feel for the next 20 years I have a home to do stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas I do live on the road, but you still got to have a home base.
I think what I'm most excited about too is, you talk about the things that you're good at, or having those conversations being you're going to get these awesome people on, but you're going to be able to bring out your side out of them. And for people that go on the podcast circuit, for example, it's a lot of the same Q&A. Yeah. You are a conversationalist. You will bring the fun money out of people. Yeah, you bring out the non-Q&A stuff. And that's why I think what makes podcasts so great is it doesn't have to be a journalist or a reporter doing their thing. It's someone who's done something similar having conversations. Well, when we did it, it was this way. Oh, when we did it, it was this way. That's really valuable to anyone that wants to listen.
Yeah, also money. I mean, when I had Wall Strip, the idea was to go to CBS. My one moment where I thought I was going to be famous, beyond where I was famous, was they were hitting me up for ideas, and I thought, well, there should be a 30-minute show after Letterman or whatever where people just talk about money. Yeah. The guest says, "What's in your wallet?" Let's pull out our wallet. What do you got? Do you have your wallet?
I don't.
Okay.
So let's go
through what's in your wallet. Or what are the 6 apps on your phone? You know what I mean? If I needed 10 grand
talk about that,
for an emergency, how would you go get it? Like if you're a celebrity. And so those are the questions that I think never get asked. It's like, oh, tell us about your movie. Not about like the chaos in your life or the stress that money causes. Or your best investment of all time. When did you think you really made it? These are the questions that I think, you know, people on that are perceived as successful, they had the same problems with their companies and with money. And so I think those are the things that don't get asked. I think I'm in a position to ask because I've invested in over 100 companies and I've lost money in pretty much every stock known to mankind. So let's
close out with this question because I realize we are getting short on time. Have you learned in your life your best lessons from terrible investments or investments that just went gangbusters?
Well, you learn from both.
Okay.
But terrible ones are they're harder to forget. You learn from a few. You learn from the ones you missed that turned out to be great. We call that the anti-portfolio. And I get that happen to me all the time. Carta, Airbnb, Twitter. As much as money as I made around them, I didn't make money on them. And I had a chance to invest in them. So you learn from that because you go back and you go, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
You generally learn more from the failures because it's like cancer. It just eats away at you.
When you go back and say, what was I thinking?
Why did I write the check?
Do you have
I had
notes?
the signals.
Like, do you kind of say, here's what I'm doing, here's why, and then does that adjust over time, or do you stick with those no matter what?
Well, your checks get bigger, so everything adjusts. Yeah. You spend more time with the founders. When you're writing a $25K check, you can have a drink with the guy and go, that guy's smart, because your check doesn't move the needle. But when you're writing the main check, you're bringing in other people that kind of rely on you or maybe don't rely on you, but there's some extra responsibility, so you have to spend more time with the founder in the different situations, and a lot more stuff can go wrong before you write the first check, which is good and bad. Because a lot of it's instinct.
Yeah.
You know, the people that wrote checks at $4 million valuation to Uber, they didn't do much due diligence, right? They just had an instinct, and it was a great idea, and it was a miracle. I mean, miracles, you can write the history any way you want, but that's a miracle. Software creates miracles, so we want to continue to be in the miracle business. But it's the losers that teach you. Because you're trying to, like, that you can go, okay, that type of personality, let's be on the lookout for. Whereas the winners, I mean, they look so different. The winners just look so different.
Awesome. I could do an entire podcast just talking about what winners and losers look like, so maybe we'll do that next time.
Yep.
Howard, thank you so much for sitting down with me and chatting. I know we got some more to talk about off air. Best place to find you, I would probably say Twitter is the best way to connect with you.
HowardLindzon.com.
HowardLindzon.com.
And then Twitter, I'm active in
Perfect.
StockTwits. But if you like stocks, StockTwits. If you like talking about stocks, if you like random silliness, Twitter.
And if you like pictures of beautiful sunsets over Camelback, I've noticed lately.
Yeah, Twitter
on
and
your
Instagram.
Bike rides. Yeah.
People like my selfies, including my family. My gauge is my family.
Perfect.
If they read the stuff, so if they think I'm coming over the top, they tell me. So I think, it's a fine line when you're sharing.
Yeah.
And I use my family as the gauge. I haven't embarrassed them endlessly, so it's good.
That's very good. Well, awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you for sitting down. We got TJ producing this show. Hoff is out on a meeting. Brandon, Cecily, thank you guys for taking notes back there. Everyone, thanks for listening and or watching. Howard, thank you again for sitting down with me. Let's talk all of the real business stuff off air now. Thank you, guys. Subscribe, review us, all that fun stuff, because it's super important. And when Hoff's not here, if we get a bunch of reviews, then we can blame Hoff. So we all want that. Bye, guys. Thank you.